In our last analysis, we spent a lot of time marveling at Justinian's dream, right? The sweeping conquests, that breathtaking architecture, the whole codification of Roman law. But, well, history is rarely just one big, shining success story. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to uncover the grim, frankly devastating reality behind Justinian's dark empire.
Okay, let's dive right into this by asking a really provocative question, one that literally haunted the people living through it. What if Byzantium's greatest emperor was actually its absolute worst demon? I mean, it's a heavy question for sure, but the sources we have from the 6th century, they paint this incredibly bleak picture of an empire pushed to its absolute breaking point, all because of the ambition of just one man.
To understand how we get there, we first need to look at Section 1, the shadow of the great dream. We really have to examine the hidden costs of all that ambition.
Because behind this gorgeous public facade, the glorious Hagia Sophia, those unified legal codes, all that military triumph, lay a really stark, hidden reality. See, all of that splendor, it was funded by an incredibly brutal system of taxation. Justinian used these utterly ruthless officials, the most notorious being a guy named John of Cappadocia, basically to squeeze the citizens dry. To fund the emperor's endless wars and these massive building projects, the administration effectively stripped all the wealth away from the middle classes. We're talking massive corruption and a really agonizing loss of basic civil liberties.
Now to find the real story behind this suffocating atmosphere, we turn to Section 2, the secret history. We're going to uncover some hidden truths from a literal 6th century whistleblower.
And that whistleblower is the historian Procopius. Now, Procopius was actually the secretary to Justinian's top general, Belisarius. He wrote the official, glowing histories of the empire's wars. But in secret, he penned something totally different, the Staria Secreta, or the secret history. Think of this as an ancient, leaked dossier. He had to keep it completely hidden, because publishing this while Justinian or his wife Theodora were still alive would have meant, well, a very agonizing death.
The crucial takeaway here is that Procopius completely strips away that noble lawgiver image. He portrays Justinian as a ruler driven just entirely by greed. I mean, despite being the guy who codified Roman law, Procopius tells us Justinian was perfectly happy to bend his own absolute laws for profit. He was essentially putting justice up for sale to the highest bidder.
And Procopius, he absolutely does not hold back. He claimed Justinian was deliberately trying to ruin the empire, pointing out the unprecedented taxation and corruption. But guys, it gets wilder. He literally accused Justinian of being a demon in human form. He claimed palace guards saw him walking the halls at night with no head. No way, right? He also viciously attacked Empress Theodora, dedicating pages and pages to detailing a scandalous, depraved past as a circus performer and courtesan. Now, obviously, we have to look at this impartially as politically charged hyperbole from a very disgruntled aristocratic class. But the fact that an official historian was calling the emperor a literal headless demon, that just shows you the immense, boiling hatred simmering right beneath the surface of the imperial court.
And that simmering anger, it didn't just stay hidden in secret books. It violently exploded into the streets in Section 3, the Nika Massacre, a rebellion written entirely in blood in 532 AD.
Let's trace how this actually escalated. So, in Constantinople, chariot racing factions, mostly the blues and the greens, they functioned almost like modern sports hooligans, but mixed with intense political parties. After some street violence, Justinian cracked down and refused to issue full pardons. And then, in a totally unprecedented move, these bitter rivals actually united against him. Shouting Nika, which means conquer or win, they rioted for 6 straight days. They literally burned half the city to the ground, including the original Hagia Sophia, and even went straight to the Hippodrome to crown a brand new emperor.
Trapped in the palace, Justinian was panicking. He actually had ships loaded up with treasure, totally ready to flee into exile. But in this defining historical moment, it was his wife, Empress Theodora, who stepped up. She coldly commanded him to stay and fight. She famously declared that la purpura el mejor sudario, that the imperial purple makes the best burial shroud. Basically, she'd rather die an empress than live out her life as a fugitive.
But the cost of his survival was just terrifying. Bolstered by Theodora's spine of steel, Justinian ordered his top generals, Belisarius and Narses, to trap the rioters inside the Hippodrome. And in a single afternoon, imperial troops systematically slaughtered an estimated 35,000 of their own citizens. That's like wiping out an entire modern town in a few hours. The rebellion was just completely crushed,
in an ocean of blood. Which brings us to Section 4, the ruin of Italy. See, while he crushed his people at home, Justinian's obsessive need to reclaim the Western Roman Empire resulted in a devastating war. A war that brought absolute ruin to the very lands he claimed to be saving.
Let's look at the timeline of this Gothic war in Italy. It kicks off in 535, and by 540, honestly, it looked like a really swift Byzantine victory. But then, thanks to just terrible mismanagement by imperial officials and a massive Gothic resurgence led by their new king, Totila, the war just didn't end. Instead, it dragged on into a devastating 20-year meat grinder.
Instead of a glorious Roman restoration, the reality was a literal horror story. Just look at these numbers. Before the war, Rome had around 100,000 inhabitants, still maintaining a lot of its ancient splendor. But by the end of it, a mere 30,000 starving survivors living among absolute ruins. The legendary aqueducts were cut. Priceless classical statues were literally hurled off the city walls just to crush attackers. Rome was basically turned into a ghost town.
By the time Byzantine forces finally secured the peninsula in 553, the true cost was practically incalculable. Italian agriculture was totally destroyed, causing widespread famine. The ancient Roman senatorial aristocracy effectively wiped out or left completely impoverished. And tragically, this brutal 20-year conflict left Italy so deeply depopulated and fragmented that, just over a decade later, a new Germanic tribe, the Lombards, they just easily invaded and tore the peninsula apart all over again.
But you know, the final, apocalyptic blow to his reign wasn't even man-made. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a riot. It was Section 5, the scourge of the plague, an unprecedented biological nightmare.
In 541 AD, Yersinia pestis, the bubonic plague, arrived in Constantinople. Originating in Egypt and traveling right along the trade routes, this biological disaster hit the incredibly dense urban centers of the empire. It brought public life, trade, and the entire military machine to a complete, terrifying standstill.
And the accounts we have from witnesses are just chilling. The historian John of Ephesus reported that at the peak of the outbreak, up to 16,000 people were dying every single day in the capital. 16,000! The authorities literally couldn't dig graves fast enough. They actually resorted to packing bodies into the hollow towers of the city's fortifications and just letting them rot. The sheer scale of death is hard to even wrap your head around. It wiped out a staggering 40% of Constantinople's inhabitants in just a matter of months. And it absolutely did not stop at the capital's walls. Across the broader Mediterranean and the Middle East, the demographic collapse was catastrophic. Modern estimates suggest that anywhere between 25 and 50 million people died. Entire agricultural regions were just abandoned because, well, there was literally no one left to harvest the crops. It brought the global economy straight to its knees. Yet, honestly, what is perhaps the most shocking part of all of this is the state's response. Because even amidst this living nightmare, Justinian's bureaucratic machine showed absolutely no mercy. I mean, the wars in Italy and against Persia, they still needed funding, so the imperial tax collectors aggressively targeted the impoverished survivors. They forced them to pay not only their own taxes, but the taxes of their dead neighbors, all just to try and balance the empire's failing budget. So I want to leave you with this final thought for today's explainer. Justinian dreamed of a unified, glorious Rome. But the reality was a nightmare of crippling taxes, the slaughter of his own citizens, a completely devastated Italy, and an empire ravaged by plague that was shown no mercy whatsoever. In his ruthless, bloody pursuit of restoring the Roman dream, did Justinian actually ensure its absolute and final destruction? It's a really dark legacy, but a totally crucial one to understand. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you in the next analysis.